All right, click, 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 click. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Rachael, and I go live on Fridays. I've taken the last couple Fridays off because of it was summertime, right? So now we're back on, and today we've got to talk about something extremely, extremely important, and that's vaping. As of now, as of the broadcast of this, we know of 4 related deaths to vaping, and those have been in Oregon, Illinois, Indiana, and I think actually 2 of them were in Indiana. Okay, so with all of that being said, it is imperative that we talk about vaping and really how we've come here, because vaping and e-cigarettes have been around for a minute, right? And I know there was a time where they encouraged physicians like myself to encourage people to use them. They're like, well, if you're going to smoke cigarettes, you might as well use an e-cig because studies and data shows that they are safer for you. But this was before any long-term data was available, and as we do, we jumped on the bandwagon and told everybody, get rid of your cigarettes, but instead of stopping smoking, you can reduce some of your symptoms if you use an e-cigarette. So let's talk about how that even came to be and what are some of the symptoms associated with these people who've died. They have over 400 people who've reported an illness related to their vape pens, and basically all reports now are pointing to the fact that there's something new going on with the vape pens that wasn't necessarily happening to them before. So let's talk about that a little bit. First, let's talk about some of the symptoms that are occurring. All right, so when people are presenting with a vape illness, and this is important because we've got teenagers vaping, some of you are vaping, I've used a vape pen before, so I'm very familiar with it. So when it comes to vaping and this vape-related illness, some of the symptoms, it's kind of like a flu-like symptoms. Vomiting is one of the common complaints. Then some people are actually saying that they're having chest pain. And the chest pain is usually related to shortness of breath and them saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. I even read one report where his friends wouldn't believe that he couldn't breathe. The next part of that is fatigue. They're complaining that they're super tired, and some of them are even complaining of diarrhea. So that's why physicians and everyone really thought that perhaps this was a, kind of like an infectious process. But when they actually end up looking at it, they're realizing, hey, there's no infection here. So that becomes part of the problem. So then what they're doing is they start doing x-rays, and when they do x-rays, they look and they see this massive issue in the lungs. Some have reported it as looking like popcorn in the lungs. Some have reported it looking like fat lobules in the lung. And what appears to be happening is somehow or the other, the people who have had this happen to them, it's almost like the lung tissue is starting to break down on itself. And as a result of it, people are having issues breathing. So let's talk a little bit about how we even got here to the point where physicians were, and all of us were really kind of saying, hey, e-cigarettes are much safer than regular cigarettes. So when it comes to regular cigarettes or a spliff or a blunt or a joint, what's happening is when it's heated, when the nicotine or tobacco or marijuana is in contact with fire, what happens is something called combustion, and chemicals are released that are typically toxic in nature, and it affects the lungs. And as a result of that, we see long-term damage. Things like emphysema, things like COPDs, things like asthma-related symptoms, shortness of breath. And so what happens is when e-cigarettes came on the market and vaping came on the market, they said it's safer. And why did they say it's safer? Well, let's see. Let me show you why. Let me show you why. Why is vaping better? Well, they considered vaping to be better because you got this cute pen, right? And what's not happening is combustion, but what's happening is steam and vapor is coming from the heated liquid. And then what's happening is, as you're inhaling it into your lungs, they said it was a better experience because it's just vapor. And so they basically said, this is safer. So as we know now, we know that this is not actually an issue, right? That this is maybe not as safe. Maybe we did give some misinformation. But what you're going to find now is that, let me see. There I go. What you're going to find now is that they're not really saying, maybe we were wrong about vaping and e-cigarettes. What they're actually saying is that maybe what we know now is that there's something contaminating the cartridges, and that's what's causing the issue. But I want you to keep in mind that and someone just asked, is this live? Yes, this is live. And then, what I want you to keep in mind is that when you're actually vaping or doing an e-cigarette, you've got all this stuff that someone mixed together in a factory, right? And then gave it to you in the store or gave it to you on the street and basically says, well, go ahead and smoke this, right? So when you're smoking maybe some marijuana rolled into a paper or some tobacco rolled into a paper, you kind of know what you're getting there, right? And so I think the problem with this is that we don't really know what we're getting. So why all of a sudden now, right? Why people have been vaping for years. We've been saying e-cigarettes are safer. Why now, right? And okay, so the question is, do I know how many chemicals are in cigarettes? So many chemicals are in cigarettes, and so many chemicals are in e-cigarettes, right? I mean, you can't escape chemicals, but I think what the thought process was when the FDA and everybody in the American Heart Association, everybody gets behind and says, go with e-cigarettes, I think the thought process was that there's less chemicals there, and that maybe they're safer. And because it's a vapor instead of a combustion byproduct, right? Well, I've never bought that, and I don't think I've ever told a patient, oh, let's cut back on your cigarettes and let's go to an e-cigarette. I'm basically like, maybe we should just stop with the nicotine and the tobacco altogether. And if you decide to do that, that's fine. Here's what studies are showing. But let me just say this, there's no long-term data on e-cigarettes, and they're not regulated, and there is long-term data on cigarettes. So let's be clear about that. So why now? Why all of a sudden are we seeing issues? And what are some of the theories that have been put out there as to why these people are getting so sick? We've had at least 4 people dying, over 450 people complaining of this illness and hospitalized. What's happening? And most of them have been extremely healthy. They've been young people. They've been athletes. They've been teenagers. That's why this is such a big deal. So why now, right? E-cigarettes have been out for a while. You've vaped. Maybe I've vaped. Who knows? But what happens is, so when they have the THC or the marijuana, they use an oil solvent to kind of get the active substance out to create basically a juice or e-liquid that's going to be used in the pen cartridge. So that when you press the button on the pen cartridge, what happens? You get this vapor that you inhale after it's heated up. And then the whole idea is that since it's vapor, it's not so harsh. But the problem is they're suspecting that some of the oil solvent has remained in the cartridge. And as a result of it, we've had people becoming rather ill. So that's one of the theories, right? The main theory that's happening right now is that they found vitamin E oil in a number of the products. And the idea is, think about it like this. So when it's heated up and you inhale it, the bad thing about when it cools back down is it goes back to its original state. So if there was a little bit of oil in that product, then when you inhale it, now what's going to happen is oil is going to actually fill up your lungs. Your lungs are only designed to deal with gas. They don't know what to do with oil, and oil ends up becoming destructive. It becomes to the point where your inflammatory response or those white blood cells and everything that we use to fight off infection gets there, and they can't do anything with oil. Oil is disastrous. It's kind of like if you spill oil on your pants, your shirt, whatever it is, it's done. There's nothing you can do about it, right? So let's talk a little bit about why oil is even that bad, all right? So when it comes down to it, why would oil in the lungs be so bad? Because it comes into gas exchange, right? So oxygen comes in through the nostrils. As we breathe in, it fills the lungs, right? And so now that oxygen has to get to all our tissues and all of our cells. So what happens is the red blood cells actually carry oxygen to the tissues that need it, right? Super important, super great. But and the process becomes, as the oxygen adheres or sticks to the red blood cells, CO2 is released. And guess what? As a result of it being released, now we're back to this gaseous exchange process, right? So we inhale the oxygen, just the good stuff, and the bad stuff is going to come back out. So the problem becomes that when your lungs aren't working properly, the oxygen that needs to get to the tissues can't get there. We even have one reported case where the guy was so sick that they had to actually put the oxygen into the blood supply to actually make sure his tissues stayed oxygenated. His lungs had gotten that incredibly bad, right? So when it comes down to it, I think we have to start saying, okay, we don't really know what's in that. You know, if you have to smoke your marijuana, if you have to smoke your tobacco, I honestly, at this point, am saying, do not buy a vape pen. Don't use it if you have it, because we don't know what's going on. Instead, go old school. Roll a doobie, roll a spliff, roll a joint, roll a blunt. Do whatever you need to do. But really, at this point, I think it's safe to say that maybe the vape pen that you bought last week, even though you invested in it, it's time to kind of slow it down until we have more answers. That's what we're waiting for, is more answers. Because, you know, at the end of the day, 98% of the people who were hospitalized with these vape-related illnesses, half of them ended up in the ICU. The other piece of this is that 84% of them had been using marijuana, you know, but a lot of them had been using the marijuana and the e-cigarettes. You know, some of them were chronic users of e-cigarettes, some of them weren't. And the only real commonality they're finding right now is that they found some byproduct of vitamin E oil. So who knows? Maybe it's a supply issue, but the big tips here are going to be that you don't want to, here, let me show you. You don't want to alter your device. You know, a lot of times people will alter the vape pen so that they get a rougher vape or a smoother vape. Don't alter it. Don't use any street-bought e-juice or vapes. You know, they actually have both. They have some evidence that people were getting theirs from the store, from a dispensary, and other people were getting them on the street, so they don't really know. I would say avoid chronic use of the vape pen. If you go out and you got a vape, you got to do it. Don't, you know, try not to make this into a habit right now, as we're still looking for answers. You know, if you run into issues, be honest. We had one terrible story of a young person who was hanging out with their friends and told them, man, I can't breathe. They thought he was kidding. So they dropped him off anyway, and he had to Uber to the emergency room, right? And I think it's important here to keep in mind that we don't really have any long-term data as to what these vape pens are actually doing. And I think it's really important that you know, at this point, you know, you've seen the news, you've read the things, you know, go ahead and vape at your own risk, because at this point, you know, we keep having the data, we keep hearing these terrible stories, young people getting on and talking about how they never thought it would happen to them. They used to be hikers and athletes, and now they've got a long process of lung repair. So vapor starts off as steam, right? But then it goes back to its natural state. So if there's some strange byproduct that your body isn't going to know how to handle, or that is a contaminant, that's where the problem comes. And I think if you really want to think about it like this, right? At Coachella, everybody's got great bandanas and masks over their face because we don't want to inhale all that sand that's whipping around, right? Think about it like this. Someone starts coughing in a movie theater. What do? We move because we don't want to inhale all of that. We're very particular about what we want to inhale. So when you're buying a cartridge and you don't know what's in it, you know, you've got to be very, very conscious of that. As a matter of fact, one of the popular brands, Juuls, were a number of the brands that people have been using here. So just be very, very careful. And I'll say this, you know, when it comes to e-cigarettes and vaping, there was a study done in 2016 that found diacetyl in about 39 of 51 tested flavored vape juices, the e-juice, right? And we know for a fact that that exact same chemical is related to popcorn lung. And what popcorn lung is basically when they look on the x-ray, this person comes in with this acute shortness of breath, and then they look and it almost like their lung tissue looks like popcorn. So at the end of the day, I would basically say go old school here, go back to your pipe, go back to your bongs, go back to your papers, go back to doobies, blunts, J's, or whatever, until there's more data available, all right? So I hope this helps. Vaping Fagin is on here talking about you can't get popcorn lungs. I mean, I recognize that this is a blow to the vaping industry. I do. I recognize that. And I also recognize that life and death can't all be about dollars and cents. And when it comes to dollars and cents, what we as physicians and people who have family members and loved ones who vaped have to do is think about what makes sense for us. And at this point, it makes no sense for me or anyone in my household to use a vape pen until we get more answers. So, hey, all right. So, hey, I'm Dr. Rachael. Follow me, like the video, share the video. I know Vaping Fagin, I know how you feel about this because you obviously really enjoy vaping, which I think a lot of people do, which is why this has become such a national headline here. We got over 450 people that we know of that are sick from vaping. So I think at this point, we do have to slow down and reevaluate. We don't know what's in that juice. You know, and until we know what the problem is, I do advocate for slowing down on that. And the Centers of Disease Control is actually asking physicians like myself to discourage e-cigarettes and vaping at this point, okay? Vaping saved your life. I understand that, Fagin. And I understand that THC and marijuana and CBD actually has saved a lot of people's lives. But at this point, until we got more data about what's going on with those pens, I still can't say just use your pen. That wouldn't be wise. So thank you for sharing, Vaping Fagin. Vaping Fagin. So for those of you, I'm Dr. Rachael Ross. I'm a functional family medicine physician and a clinical sexologist. Today, it's all about vaping because, we only get one set of lungs, and once they're shot, it really is a disastrous climb back up, particularly as sick as these people are getting, all right? So we'll see you later. All right. Oh, did I say like the video, share the video, follow, make sure the people in your household, your loved ones, your friends and family members, it's Friday, right? So make sure they have this information because, for most people, this happens in a spur of the moment. All of a sudden, everything seems fine, and then they're ill. But if you want to rewind the video, we talked about some of the symptoms that are associated. It's more like a flu-like illness. Starts with fever, not feeling good, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach aches, chest pain, all of that, and then acutely becoming very short of breath. All right? So until next time, I'll see you guys later. Subscribe to the channel. Make sure you turn your alerts on so you know that when I go live, I'm going live every Friday, and then we go live sometimes in between there. And we were going to talk about sex trafficking and how you can actually recognize sometimes when you're in a massage parlor if maybe even your service provider has been sex trafficked or things like that. So that's what our next topic is going to be. But I had to stray a little bit and talk about vaping because it's a life and death situation. All right, bye.